Live. So we want to talk today about something that we refer to as a feedback loop, but it's kind of a fancy term. It just really means a communication exchange, right? That when you are engaged, whether it's your self-talk or whether it's in a relationship, there is this kind of exchange, a loop that starts, right? And the origin source of these loops really is your identity. Just to cover your identity is the conclusions you've come to about who you are, these deep-seated beliefs that fuel how you show up, the expectations you have for yourself and others. It creates your mindset, it creates your habits. All of those go back to this kind of foundational aspect or source of your identity. And so these feedback loops exist. Like the other day, I was expecting to hear back from someone, and it had been several days since I had contacted them, and they just flat out were, I don't know if ghosting is exactly the right term, but it sure felt like it, right? And all of a sudden I started really getting in my head thinking, man, this seems to happen to me a lot. And then my head started finding other examples historically of how this has happened. So I had this one thought connected to, unfortunately, an unhealthy belief about myself that started to snowball. And suddenly now I'm in this loop of self-defeat, self-doubt, for a good 20 minutes, it took over me, right? And I really felt like it was like a snowball that was building momentum, getting stronger and stronger. Sounds like LinkedIn is for some reason having an issue
Okay.
connecting. So we'll just keep going.
Okay.
I think this is recording. But so this thing takes over, and next thing I know, I literally, my body is tense. I'm tight. I feel sick to my stomach. I'm actually engaging with my wife, but I'm not really present, right? I mean, I'm stuck in this loop, and the ability to get out of those things in the past would take over my entire day, right? I mean, they could easily start to run and interfere with my ability to do my best work at work, with my ability to be present and engage with my family. And so the ability to exit out of those and recognize at some point, hey, I can hit the stop button and I can decide to exit out and recreate or initiate a feedback exchange that's actually really healthy, moving towards gratitude, moving towards, kindness or whatever those things are. So does this make sense? These idea of these feedback exchanges and how to stop destructive ones.
Man, I don't, every time we start talking about, a certain kind of pressure point here, it's like, I think these are so common, to all of us, right? There's nobody
Yeah.
alive who doesn't feel like, whether it's, I don't get that particular phone call or even text message now, or, that kind of stuff where you're not, maybe even just slightly, you're thinking, is it me? And I got to say, I love the fact you use the word, and I kind of want to ask a follow-up question here. But you use the word exit out of that. Like we're
Yeah.
in the spiral, right? And, I think there's another author that we talked about that uses the term crazy cycle.
Yeah.
It's this idea that we're just, oh, I can't get out of this. Oh man, of course it's me. And there's all this stuff going on around you. Life's happening around you, but you're in this little box, whatever you want to call it. And you're like, dang it, I got to get out of this. And so one thing you said at the beginning here, though, is you said, I find that I'm in an unhealthy belief about myself. Can you
Yeah.
expound a bit more on that? I'd like to follow up on that.
Yeah, I have developed certainly a series of positive beliefs, and those have gotten stronger over the years. But there are ones that exist. They are historical about not feeling worthy, not feeling good enough, right? There's a lot of issues around like just kind of loneliness and believing that ultimately I can't count on people, and there's a sense that I'm a sensitive person. Are my emotions too much for people? So there's a series of these beliefs around that.
Yeah.
And so, I start to get concerned when I reach out to people and then they don't respond. There's uncertainty, there's ambiguity. I don't know why they're not responding, right? It could be a variety of reasons. And probably the healthiest explanation is they're busy. They have their own life, right? And you would think that I would, have the perspective to kind of fill that into the ambiguity or uncertainty there. Unfortunately, right, some of those old beliefs kick in and it says, well, I think I know why. It must be because, that I'm too much,
Yeah.
that they don't want to respond to me because, I'm putting them off or whatever it is. And once that kicks in, right, now all of a sudden that's connected to like a confirmation bias, an old belief, a conclusion I've come to myself.
Yeah.
And we know that your brain starts then looking for all this evidence to support this conclusion. And so I've come up with 4 or 5 different nuggets that all fit this narrative. And I'm like, yep, this is what it is. And it feels awful.
Yeah.
Does that explain it?
Yeah, nailed it. I think just for, for the listener, I want to make sure that, as we're talking about this topic, and we really dial it in emotionally, for, for us as we kind of ponder this, because I think we're emotional beings, right? We can see logical causes and effects and things. Well, if I do this, I get this, that kind of thing. And at the same time, it's amazing how many times we just say, well, I'm procrastinating, or I'm going to wait on that, for whatever reason. But what it ends up being, of course, is we are we're kind of emotionally stuck in this rut where we're feeling a bit less than, a little bit I don't know, I like that you said an unhealthy belief about myself. We're thinking that everybody else is something else and we're just a little bit less than. I'm a little bit more needy than everybody. I'm a little bit more discombobulated. It's just when, of course, humans are humans, right? And there's probably a logical explanation. And anyway, so yeah, I totally resonate with that.
Yeah, it's amazing. I see this a lot of times in my office when I'm working with a team, where I can see someone makes a comment, it's kind of a loaded comment, and you can see it's bait, right? That they have just set the bait to get someone to respond, right? In an angry, upset way. And often it's because they believe that person's an angry person, right? Literally, I heard this other day is, you don't want to be doing this. You don't want to be, it was a partner, you don't want to be involved with this. And the person's like, I do, right? I genuinely do. And the person was so convinced that that person wasn't really in it intentionally, wasn't being purposeful with that he continued to badger and badger and badger until eventually the person was like, you're right, I don't want to be a part of this anymore. And he's like, see, I knew it. And that was a feedback loop. He started already with a sense of, a belief. And I know, having know this business person, right? It's part of, he does this in other areas too. And then that belief started in a communication, and he created the very exchange he was expecting until he got what he expected. Yeah. And we do this all the time, right? I see couples, I see families do this, and you'd think sometimes that people are on their best behavior in a coaching session, and probably it's a good thing they don't, because I actually get to see in real time, what's going on, and so they set the bait, and yet it's so difficult for people to pump the brakes, to stop and recognize, oh, wait a minute, I actually have the ability to not take the bait. Yeah. I can pause, breathe, stay calm, and I can choose a different response. I can choose a response that will create a completely different exchange, a much healthier one. Yeah. But it is tough. Once those things get, set in motion, I mean, it's almost like they don't need your consent, right? They just start to happen without, your conscious consent. Can you relate to that at all?
Yes. And what's fascinating is I think there's we end up thinking that the pendulum has to swing really wide, or there's some huge pivot that needs to happen. So I love the idea that you use the word exit out or opt out. And it just kind of disarms that, right? It's like, yeah, I think I'm gonna just opt out of this one, and just take that gentle step over into reality, which is a lot of grace, right? Hey, I'm not perfect. I don't have to be. What I bring to this world, man, it's something I believe in, right? I'm here to be uniquely myself, to have an impact that, the dent that looks like David Osk. I'm here to make a difference, to lift people up, all that kind of stuff. So that I know, based on my own sense of myself, and that those things that I want to, bring into the world, I'm pretty clear on that. So that opt, and I love that word. I'm just going to opt out of this one. It's not, I have to become somebody else, or they're not going to like me, or, it's, and we do that so often when we're not even thinking about it. It can be with our, friends and family, or someone, we've only met twice that's not calling us back, and we probably have the wrong phone number. Yeah. So this really important stuff. I don't think there's anybody who doesn't deal with this, at least occasionally.
And I think right now, right, as we're heading into this, we're not heading, we just had Thanksgiving. We're getting ready to head into the Christmas season. People are often, there's expectations. You're dealing with family that maybe you don't always have to see, the in-laws. We got all these things. You're getting pulled in a dozen different directions, right? There's deadlines, there's things you're trying to wrap up and work. And so already, right, you're kind of at your ceiling of, what you're able to handle. And so the ability to have the self-control, or the kind of personal sense of mastery, or whatever you want to call it, right, is certainly compromised. And so this is a time where it's easier to get sucked into really unhealthy, again, whether it's the conflict within, the chaos that you create, right, by allowing these loops to kind of, build momentum. And once they build a certain amount of momentum, they really are difficult. You're kind of on a ride at that point, right? And it's who knows, hopefully it doesn't last longer than an hour or a day. But once it builds a certain amount of momentum, it is really tough to stop. I mean, there are times in my coaching sessions where I am like screaming, like, stop, right? You guys need to stop. And still, it's like they see red, right? There's a sense of them just really losing control. And afterwards, you can see the sense of remorse and the regret or the regret or the guilt that that's not how they wanted to react. That's not at all who they want to be. And they see the damage, right? And unfortunately, all it does is start a cycle of guilt. Then they start to justify, right? And instead of leaning into that to grow, it never changes. And I think you cover such an important aspect that the way out of this cycle is you have to start by anchoring, right? Who your response is and who you are by first kind of pre-committing to who you are. And once you have a really solid foundation, right, where you've resolved the sense of, this is what defines me. These are the character strengths, right, that I build myself on. These are the types of exchange. I know I've given the story of the drive with my wife where she, made a comment on a 45-minute car drive a few minutes in that was hurtful.
Again, honestly, I think it's so simple, but at the same time, and I think we can all relate. So I'd love to hear that again.
Yeah. So 5 minutes into a 45-minute car ride with my wife, she made a comment that was, kind of hit right, in the sensitive spot. And my initial response to it, right, it engaged a feedback loop that certainly is an old pattern of mine and it felt like this was natural law, right? Well, of course, because she said this, now I'm going to shut down and emotionally cut off, and I'm just going to, do the silent game, and I'm going to punish her, right? And it really felt like that's the just thing, because A happened, now B. But luckily, because I've done some of the work and being able to really define this is who I want to be as a husband, right? These are the values that I stand on in my marriage. These are the types of exchanges, how I want to make my wife feel. I was very aware of the fact that I was out of alignment. I was not heading true north, right? I was like way off course. And so I was able to lean into that and recognize, hey, this isn't the type of car ride I want to have. It's not the exchange I want to have. Because I know what that does, right? I know that we end up for 45 minutes. The more I go silent, the more she gets angry. The more I feel her anger, the more I retreat and go within, right? And then we get to this event, and here I'm supposed to put on a smile and laugh and talk to everyone, knowing I feel like a fraud, and then we get back in the car and it starts all over again. And it's just an awful cycle. It really is. So the ability to recognize quickly into that exchange, oh, there's actually other options. I can opt out right now, and I can choose to create a different exchange. So fortunately, I was able to do something that made my wife laugh, right? And kind of both started laughing. It totally broke the ice. Yeah. Now all of a sudden we're holding hands and we have this really lovely car ride and we have a great night, and it contributes. Like, we know that there actually is a specific ratio of positive exchanges to negative ones that's required for a marriage to thrive, even for a business. There's something called the Losada line, right? That means that there has to be 3-to-1 positive feedback or kind of communication exchanges, interactions, to every one negative, just to have a functional office culture, right? And it's 5-to-1 where people rise up. They love going to work. They do their best, most creative, innovative work, right? They're really committed and engaged. And that's where you create a thriving culture, right? And we know within your own head, your own self-talk, 5-to-1 seems to be the magic number there. Yeah. But how does that feel? Does those numbers seem really high to you? Do they seem achievable? Like, how do you go about creating that type of ratio?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I think it's more simple than we think it is. I think quite often we're thinking, I've got to have some deep conversation with somebody or have some really huge interaction.
Nice.
And I think that, quite often, I mean, I work at home every day, right? And we homeschool kind of hybrid. So my kids, Lisa, she works, part-time job, so she's gone some, but we're around each other quite a bit. I mean, they're kind of my office, mates here, as it were, right? During the day, but we're all kind of doing our thing. We're busy. They're teenagers. Parker's working. Kate's giving lessons, taking lessons. I mean, there's so much going on, and we're kind of in professional mode throughout the day. At the same time, I'm really, really conscious about creating culture. Some of it is kind of a little altruistic, right? I don't want to work in a place, if you will, that I don't like. So I'm gonna do everything I can to make my environment pleasant whether it's beautiful pictures on the walls or things like that, or because that's kind of my culture right here in my office, right? At the same time, they come in, if I get downstairs and just say, hey, I'll be honest, my goal is to have a positive interaction. I mean, and I'm not making it weird either. Sometimes it's just a hug, right? Sometimes it's, hey, how you doing?
Nice.
I've been making it a habit lately is to ask Lisa, how can I make your day great? First thing I'll text her, if she's doing something else or gone or whatever, and I forget, or I'll just look at her and we're getting ready. I'm like, hey, what can I do to make your day great? A simple question, right? Or I'll be goofy and fist bump my wife, right? But she thinks it's kind of fun. So, whatever, just a pat on the back.
Yeah.
But I think that, know your audience a little bit, right? So depending on who you're with,
yeah,
I think fun, and by the way, fun is one of your core values.
That's right.
And I think that and you mentioned the car ride, right? Make a joke, right?
Yeah.
And we think, wait a second, you made light of that? Yeah. I think fun and happiness moments like that are powerful. I mean, to unlock that cycle and so on. So when you say I'm going to get back to my true north, right, to pivot slightly, opt out of this, well, what is that, right? It's using those things that are really centered to me, why I'm different from you. I mean, one of my core values is not fun, right? Mine is actually inspiration. Right. So quite often, and the kids even joke about it now, well, here's dad, giving another inspiring speech or something. And of course they're joking and I kind of laugh. But I think that it's more simple than we think it is, but I think it's absolutely vital. Because especially those of us who are leaders, whether it's our companies or anything else, if we are silent, that comes across most of the time as either indifference or anger. So I think a proactive approach in a very measured and kind of fun way can have lasting impact throughout the course of a day or a month or week or lifetime for that matter. So I think it's way more simple than we think it is.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. And I absolutely agree, right? It really is the simple kind of consistent things that really do equal up to these, kind of a culture environment, a family environment that's conducive to everyone really being happy, being healthy, thriving. And, while there certainly can be grand moments, and those are amazing, it's the mundane, everyday things. I remember reading, it was a research, it was something based on LinkedIn, and it was looking at people who were talking about the most frustrating type of leadership communication. And it was unclear, right? When there was inconsistent communication. So it just reminds me, right? When the communication is really ambiguous, it's uncertain, it's unclear. What people project into that is anxiety, right? They project fear, they project, all kinds of stuff that's really unhealthy.
Yeah.
And so, if you're a leader out there, and whether you're leading yourself, whether you're leading your family, whether you're leading a business, right? The more that you're able to be really intentional and say, what is the expectation I have? What is the virtue that I want to bring into this business, into this type of interaction, right? How do I want my employees or my family to leave this interaction? I want them to feel inspired. I want them to leave smiling. I want them to leave feeling really appreciated, right? When you're really clear on that, and then you have a strategy that matches that, it's amazing all of a sudden how it removes this uncertainty and ambiguity, and it allows people, right, to really feel super clear in both what's expected of them and to really have that feeling.
And to, obviously back to the kind of the main topic of that, the feedback loop, what's fascinating is, if you have employees, right? And again, that silence can create a feedback loop in them. They're beholden to you. You're paying their bills. I mean, there's an expectation that is explicit, I mean, it's, that needs to be front and center all the time. So what happens quite often is as a leader, they're thinking about, it's kind of like that phone call thing. They can be thinking about, a million different things, and they walk past 10 people, because they're just in the zone, right? They're like, oh my gosh, I got to put out this fire, whatever that is. But a few people along that road might internalize that as, I wonder if I've screwed up or something like that. And again, that's pretty weighty to bear that. But at the same time, it needs to be acknowledged. If you are a leader in any capacity, and I'll be honest, especially as a dad, right? Yeah. Don't be silent. Don't be indifferent. You are the tone setter period.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I feel that the weight of that, but I kind of like it too, right? I mean,
Yep.
I get to set the tone in this house, and I even still, right? I got teenagers, so they're still looking to me. I can tell, especially Parker, right? He's looking at me like, okay, what's Dad's temperature today? You know, that kind of thing. And so it's kind of weighty, but I love that. So real quick, another question here. We're talking about that feedback loop. That thing that kind of just gets the spiral started. I think I wrote down. What was it here? Where we kind of the self-fulfilling prophecy, that kind of thing. So
Right.
what would you say then is the opt-out and the opposite of that? So if we're stuck over here, I don't want to go just to neutral, right? I want to go to thrive. So tell me that.
Yeah, it's funny. This is going to lead in. So I was with my family, my parents last night. It's my son's 6th birthday, and we just had a blast. We really had a great day. I asked him at the end of the day, on a scale of 0 to 10, right? How good was this birthday? He's like, Dad, this was a 10. So anyways, it was a lot of fun. But my mom was asking me, she's like, hey, a lot of my friends are seeing some of the content you're putting out, and they're really intrigued. They're like, so she was asking me, what is it that you do? And she probably at least once a year, right? She asked me this.
Yeah.
So I was telling her, initially starting to explain, and I realized, I help people find their true north. That's it, right? I help them to get really explicitly clear on what that true north is, right? What is that sense, that direction, that moral compass, those values that are guiding you, that when you feel connected to those, that's when you feel most alive, right? That's when you feel life is most meaningful. You're having the exact impact that you were meant or designed to have, that you're created to have. Right. And that's really, the more that you follow that day to day in all areas of your life, you start to thrive very quickly. So I say that, right, is that in those moments, and it's amazing, as feedback loops can start, as you were saying with silence, when you've been around someone long enough, all it takes is a look. Right. My wife can give me a look and I know what that means. And in my head, I'm already, I've got like the next 10 steps in my head starting to plan out. And so the ability to re-anchor to my true north in those moments is absolutely crucial, right? If I haven't defined what that is prior to these feedback exchanges, good luck, right? Trying to create recreate a healthier, feedback exchange that's going to lead to something good.
Yeah.
It's these expectations and these patterns are so deeply ingrained in our identity, right? They co-opt us, they take over. And so the ability, I've met people that sometimes have the ability to pause, they can breathe. But then again, if you don't have something to fill that gap, that void, you will just default to these patterns that you already know. Yeah. And so it's too weighty, right? There's too much kind of leverage or momentum heading in that direction. Yeah. But when you start to really anchor, who you want to be to values, and your values are the things, these core values, those words, right? The things that have the most value in your life and they're core to who you are. When you're anchored to those things, they have enough emotional weight behind them to help pull you out of these patterns into a new, healthier direction, right? So it's amazing when you get really clear and then you start, defining really clear strategies for your day-to-day interactions with your spouse at work, how it really does empower you. I was having a talk with a client just the other day, and he was recognizing boredom is just a huge trigger for him, right? When he still starts to feel bored, he just starts making really impulsive decisions, and I think the other day he's a tech genius, and he had like a smoking computer that was like, he's like, this is the byproduct, right? He's like, I just didn't, pause, and I didn't stop to reflect on, what type of response I want to have. And he said, if I would have done that, I would have saved myself, whatever amount of money it was going to cost. It was a chunk of change. Yeah. And over the past 2 weeks, right, he's been more often leaning into that boredom, that tendency to just want to impulsively, kind of create, whether it's chaos, energy, right? And he's leaning into it in a way where he's getting curious. He's leaning into it in a way where he's just reflecting and staying calm in that. And he's like, it is unbelievable, the exchanges I've had with my son, right? The creativity that has come out of this has been phenomenal. He really started to get traction in ways that, again, I love when I hear other people's authenticity and I hear their true north. There's a part of me that's jealous. I'm like, wait, I want what you have, right? And then I have to pause and reflect and be like, wait a minute, that's your true north. It's not mine, right? And each one of us, when we're operating in that zone, it really is special. It really, you can feel someone when they are in their true north kind of zone and they're operating out of that, man, you can feel that.
Yeah, there's no question about it. as you're saying that, Andy, I'm thinking of the word resilient. It's like it's again this idea that this, okay, I feel like I'm in this feedback loop is, it's kind of spiraling down into an area that's just unhealthy, right? Not productive. I don't like it, whatever it is. So if we're going to opt out, I've met people, like you said, that they just seem so much more comfortable in their own skin. They're more other centered, right? They're like, what impact can I have in this room? And hey, where are we going? What's the mission? That kind of thing. And they seem so so forward in their approach to life and so on. But what I think that stems from, right, is there's not, they don't feel hollow inside. They're not trying to just continually trying to fill that spot. And that's why I think that when your core, right, your essence, the value, right, the core values, the value that you have inside of you, when you're really radical certainty on what that value is, the vocabulary that describes, that, well, then it's easy then to be like, okay, let's get on with it here, people. Let's go do something. Let's make a difference. Let's shine light. Let's lift up. Let's create. That kind of thing. But the opposite, though, is, it's just this kind of sense that I'm kind of shrinking, and I'm like, oh man, I'm lacking something. I'm scared. But the people that have that true north, like you said, I love that language. Their ability to opt out, to pivot, to the resilience portion of them is just really front and center. It's pretty obvious. And I just think in my own journey, from where I was, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, especially, to where I am now. Granted, I'm still human, right? But I feel on so many days feel so much more resilient, and able to kind of be the observer, to step back and just, as opposed to be just really sucked into the black hole there, in the feedback loop. It's like, oh, I'm going to step over here and kind of look at that for what it is.
Yeah.
And opt out, and then not just kind of get back to zero, but to think forward. What does this make possible now to thrive and to have more joy, more purpose, more courage, more fulfillment, that kind of thing. So I don't like that negative side, and I don't like zero either. I want to head the other direction and have a lot of fun.
Yeah, I felt, in my life, I think I felt so fragile, right? Going through a lot of life. I felt just this kind of sense, like so vulnerable, and not like a good vulnerable, right? It was like, I was so easily hurt and offended. And I put on a tough face, right? I don't think people knew. It was more internally. I'd go in my office, shut the door, and, sulk and, feel bad for myself and things like that.
Yeah.
And it's amazing, right? I mean, I put myself out there in ways that I certainly haven't in the past. I'm getting out there. I'm speaking in public, spots. I'm doing a lot of these things, and like you said, the inner resilience. And not everybody, loves what I have to say. I'm fortunate that, there are some people that do, but even when I do get criticism, hopefully it's constructive. Sometimes it's not, but it doesn't affect me in the way it used to, right? There is a resilience within me, belief and understanding because of that true north. I didn't have this before. And the difference between the two, and the ability to quickly rebound, right, from something, a failure, a setback, bad feedback, is life-changing. So I'll wrap up. I know we're going to wrap up here in a second.
Real quick. So obviously, those who've never met you, right, they're listening to this. They're thinking Dr. Andy Garrett, right? They're thinking, oh man, he's a psychologist, got it all together. What I love is even in your authenticity, right? You're human. And I love the fact that you don't know this just in your head. You've experienced this growth, in and of yourself to arrive to this place where you not only can just, tell somebody, but you can grab them by the arm and say, guess what? I've been there. Just relax, right? We're gonna get you through this. And so thank you for sharing, in a real healthy, vulnerable way, right? So yeah, I love that.
I appreciate that. Some of my story, that part of the reason why I've been able to kind of figure out where my true north is because there was someone in my life. There was a couple of someones, but there was one person in particular that really lived life consistently out of that true north. It was my grandpa, Carl Karcher, right? Started Carl's Jr. In a very successful business, but way more successful in his family, in his spiritual life, right? I mean, he just had such clarity on who he was, what was important to him, and that guided, right, how he showed up. Some of the worst moments in his life, He was more convicted in his principles and values, right? It was amazing to watch how he responded to adversity that would have crushed most people. And so that helped inspire me, a young kid that was broken, right? That was totally lost. My moral compass in any sense, my authenticity versus just, doing whatever it meant to feel, liked or whatever. Man, I chose the feeling liked every time. And I completely lost any sense of direction of authentic, true north. Yeah. And so it was only in going back and looking at, man, what did my grandpa do? Right. And there's 4 or 5 other people in my life too, that just had a presence to them, where you could feel their true north. And other people, they really, I was fortunate to eulogize my grandpa. And when I got up, I said, he was like our North Star as a family. Whenever we felt lost, we could look to him, and the gravitational pull, right, of his love, of his warmth, of the care that he had for all of us made us feel safe and allowed us to get through tough times, right? When you start living at a true north place, you start to create this navigational kind of this pull, right? This magnetic pull. And so, that really is what inspired me. And when I kind of deconstructed what he did and a few other people we call, authentic exemplars, we should call them true north exemplars, but I saw a pattern, and there was a clear, understanding, hey, these are the pieces that when you put these together, it changes you internally, and the feedback loops start to change. You change the identity and everything changes from there. But really powerful. I'm going to close out. I was having a conversation with a friend the other day, and it was fascinating. This guy has a very successful business. He leads a huge team, and he is amazing at what he does. He handles incredibly complex situations, right? With dynamic interpersonal challenges, all these things, and he does it with such grace. Like, he handles these things and he solves them, in real time. And he does it with, he leaves people leaving his office, they feel on fire to go do their work. At home, it's the complete opposite. He profoundly struggles, right, to just deal with, really sometimes simple exchanges. And he acts in ways that he knows. He's like, I know that I shouldn't be saying these things, and yet all of a sudden they come out of my mouth, and then I feel committed to it. And so I was just saying, why? What's the difference? Why are you so effective here and so profoundly ineffective there? And his initial response was, I don't know why. And I said, all right, I'm going to dig a little deeper than that. So, and really what it came down to, not probably a huge surprise, he has such certainty in his business identity, right? There's a sense of, I know what my strengths are, right? And I believe in them. I believe in what I'm doing with my team. I have clear direction, right? All these things, he has such certainty. So when difficult times come, he's able to rely, right, in those moments on that identity that gives him a solid foundation to respond with his best responses. At home, he's got none of that certainty, right? He constantly, he's easily offended, right? He's rigid in the way he responds to things. He's, doubts himself, doesn't know, what he's supposed to do. And because of that, he tends to have really poor responses in that. And so I asked him, I said, can I challenge you? And he said, he was in enough pain to agree. He's, I'll do anything right now. So I just gave him a few exercises. I said, I really want you to establish a coherent sense of who you are, your identity. And he was like, what you mean for my family, right? I said, no, right? I'm talking about just who you are as a whole, right? You shouldn't have different identities. You shouldn't be one person here and another person there, right? That is just too confusing, and it's going to create chaos. And so he said, all right, he has done the work and has really kind of dialed in some things. And really, I got to give him credit. He really was very intentional in how he responded to these things. So I spoke to him 2 days ago. And it's amazing. He said, man, I've never felt more secure in who I am, right? I'm in such a better place with my wife and my kids. We are having fun. We're having date nights again. He said, but the surprising thing was, he said, I'm actually much, much better. My performance at work has actually elevated significantly, and I didn't even think that was possible. Wow. He said, but my leadership has gotten better. I've dug in, right, to push through a few self-limiting kind of beliefs here. Yeah. So it's really amazing, right? That when you have a coherent sense of your true north, not your true north in one area of life, but your true north that is just true of who you are in all areas, it is amazing how you will start to see traction, progress, growth absolutely explode.
Love it. Makes total sense. Yeah, thank you.
And during this holiday season, I hope, right, if there's anyone out there that happens to be listening to this and you're like, man, how do I find my true north? Just please comment, reach out to us. We want you to, really enjoy this holiday season. We want you to be intentional, and we want to make sure that when that fish hook comes out, right, and you feel that kind of desire, like, oh, I don't want to take it. We want to make sure that you're able to resist it, and then you're able to actually respond to it with generosity, with love, with kindness, with gratitude, right, to create a completely new exchange. And I promise you, it'll be the best gift that you can give yourself and the people around you.
Wonderful word. Well said.
All right, my man. Have a great day.
Thank you. See you.